Peter's wristwatch blinked 11:04 p.m. as he staggered slightly across the polished marble floor of his penthouse in Victoria Island, Lagos. His shirt was untucked, one shoe missing, and his voice slurred as he faked a drunken laugh. A half-empty bottle of scotch dangled from his left hand. It was all an act, but the people in his life didn't know that. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of love, communication, and empathy are told. If you love stories that touch the heart and spark conversation, please like this video, subscribe, share with your friends, and tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Now back to the story. For years, Peter had been known as the quiet tech millionaire who built a logistics empire from nothing. But behind the wealth and the press interviews, Peter was lonely. Not just the kind of loneliness that silence brings, but the kind that seeps into your skin, that whispers at night, "They only love your money." 3 women had been constants in his life. Vanessa, his glamorous fiancée who smiled for cameras but rarely stayed the night. Mia, his efficient secretary who handled everything from travel plans to doctor's appointments. And Stella, the soft-spoken housemaid who came in at 6 a.m. and left before sundown, always greeting him with a warm, "Good morning, sir." He had asked himself the same question for months. If I lost it all, or became weak, would any of them still stay? So he devised a plan, one absurd enough to force real reactions. For 2 weeks, he pretended to spiral, drinking openly, missing meetings, slurring his speech, and stumbling around. The security guards were paid extra to look away. The house cameras recorded everything. He wanted to see who would help, who would ignore, and who would exploit. It started on a Wednesday night. Peter let the bottle slip from his hand as he crashed onto the living room couch, murmuring nonsense. Vanessa, who had just arrived in a silk dress for what was supposed to be date night, wrinkled her nose. "What is this?" she said sharply. "You've been drinking again?" "Peter, this is not sexy." She crossed her arms, looking more annoyed than concerned. When he mumbled, "I think I'm losing it," she didn't sit beside him. Instead, she snapped, "Then maybe call your therapist or Mia. I didn't come here to babysit." She stormed out after a 3-minute rant, slamming the door hard enough that the hallway mirror shook. Peter exhaled. First test, failed. The next day, Mia showed up with documents to sign. He let himself look disoriented, barely upright. "Mia," he slurred, "can you just sit for a minute? I feel off." She raised a brow. "Peter, I've got 3 back-to-back calls. If you're sick, call a doctor. Don't dump emotional stuff on me today." She handed him the pen and gestured to the dotted lines. Later that evening, Peter sat in his home office, eyes on the camera screen. 2 women he paid well. One he planned to marry. Both had recoiled at the first sign of weakness. He felt nothing at first, not sadness, not surprise, just confirmation. His mind circled back to his parents' voices years ago. "Don't trust people too easily, Peter. They love what you give, not who you are." But on Friday morning, something unexpected happened. He had let the briefcase with 10 million Nigerian nairas cash accidentally on purpose tip over in the hallway. Stacks of notes sprawled across the tiles. Stella had just entered with her mop and bucket, ready to start her cleaning routine. She paused, stared at the scene, then slowly knelt down and began to gather the cash. Peter, pretending to doze off nearby on the couch, cracked his eye open slightly. "Sir," Stella said gently, approaching, "I found your briefcase open. You dropped a lot of money. Should I lock it in the drawer?" Peter grunted and turned his face toward the pillow, still acting incoherent. She hesitated, then carefully zipped the bag shut, placed it on the side table, and pulled a light blanket over him. "You'll catch a cold lying like that," she whispered. She turned off the lights, picked up her mop, and quietly left the room. Peter lay there in the dark, stunned. No questions, no judgment, no hovering, no stealing, just kindness. That night, he reviewed the footage again, watching the moment on repeat. The way her hands shook slightly as she zipped the bag, the quiet way she spoke, her eyes filled with worry but not panic. She didn't know it was a test. She didn't know he had seen it. But he had. The next morning, Peter sat up straight for the first time in days. The alcohol act stopped. The slur vanished. And he made a silent decision. I need to know who this woman really is. Peter didn't say a word to anyone about what he had seen. He simply resumed his drunken behavior the following week. This time, even more intense. He let his shirt hang wrinkled, skipped shaving, left the TV blaring on news channels all day. The house staff whispered, "Olga is not okay," and avoided eye contact. But Peter wasn't watching them. He was watching her, Stella, and the others. It didn't take long for Mia to make her move. One afternoon, she marched into the mansion with files in hand and a face full of calculated sympathy. She placed her tablet on the table and sighed heavily. "Peter," she said, folding her arms. "This isn't working. The team is worried. Investors are worried. You're unraveling." Peter mumbled something incoherent and reached clumsily for the whiskey bottle. She snatched it from him and scoffed. "Do you realize what's at stake? You're lucky I'm still keeping this place together." Then she leaned forward, lowered her voice, and added, "You need someone who can handle everything. Legally, emotionally, financially. Maybe it's time we restructure things. You can stay on as chairman, but let me run things in your name. I'll protect you." It wasn't compassion. It was a corporate takeover. Peter turned away slowly and muttered, "You do that for me?" She smiled, proud of her pitch. "Of course. I've always looked out for you." That evening, Peter watched the footage again. Mia's body language said everything, pity disguised as power. It stung, but it didn't surprise him. Vanessa, however, was a different kind of wound. He invited her for a quiet dinner the next night. Candlelight, soft jazz, the ocean view. Everything she once claimed to love. He showed up looking disheveled, hair slightly messy, and eyes distant. He told her he'd been thinking of stepping away from the business, maybe giving up control. Vanessa blinked slowly, reached for her wine, and said, "Are you depressed or something?" "No," he said softly. "Just tired of pretending to be strong all the time." She scoffed. "You're acting weird. You used to be so decisive." "It's honestly a turn-off." He watched her carefully. "Would you still be with me if I weren't rich?" She laughed out loud, like he'd told the most ridiculous joke. "Peter, don't ruin the evening with hypothetical nonsense." Then she paused, added with a smile, "But if you are planning to retire, you better lock this down first." She tapped her ring finger. The air in Peter's chest deflated. She wasn't interested in him. She was interested in what he represented: security, lifestyle, status. He'd known it deep down, but it still hurt to see it confirmed. After she left, Peter sat on the edge of his bed, still dressed in the crumpled shirt she'd rolled her eyes at. He stared at the ring box on the table, the one he had planned to use for a grand proposal 6 months ago, and slowly closed it shut. Days passed. The spiral act continued. He waited, watched, observed. Nothing changed. No late-night check-ins. No calls to see if he was okay. Not even a text from Vanessa. Mia sent emails, but all business. And Stella? She just kept showing up, quietly. She brought him warm tea without being asked. Picked up his laundry with care. One morning, she placed a note on his nightstand. "Sir, I don't know what's going on, but I hope you find peace. You deserve to be okay. Stella." No one had ever told him that. The next week, he ended the test. Peter called his driver, shaved, wore his tailored blue suit, and drove to the office. The staff gasped when they saw him, like a ghost had returned. Mia stuttered when he walked into her office unannounced. "Peter, you look different." He gave a cold smile. "Do I?" She stumbled over her words, suddenly unsure of her footing. "I was going to call you today. I've prepared some reports." "I've already seen them," he cut her off. "And the footage, too." Her face dropped. "What footage?" He paused, let the silence stretch. "I staged everything. The drunkenness. The chaos. I needed to see what people do when they think I'm down." Mia turned pale. "Wait, you mean?" He didn't need to say more. She got the message. He walked out, leaving her frozen. That night, he sent Vanessa a simple message. "Don't bother coming over. I need someone who sees me, not just my bank account." She replied with one word. "Seriously?" He never answered. The next morning, Stella arrived as usual. Same uniform, same quiet steps. She began cleaning the hallway, humming under her breath. Peter walked in and stood by the door, watching her. She didn't notice him at first. "Good morning, Stella." She jumped slightly. "Sir, I didn't know you were back." He smiled gently. "You didn't ask for anything. Not once." She looked confused. "I don't understand." Peter stepped forward. "While everyone else failed a test they didn't know they were taking, you passed it." She blinked. "Test? I pretended to be weak, drunk, reckless. I wanted to see who would care." "You did." She stood frozen, mop in hand. "I'm giving you a new job," he said. Starting today, you're no longer the maid. You'll be my personal assistant. I'll train you. I'll sponsor any course you want. You deserve a better life, Stella." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why me?" Peter smiled. "Because when I had nothing to offer, you were still kind. That kind of heart is rare." She nodded slowly, speechless. And just like that, her life, and his, began to change. For the first few weeks, Stella could barely adjust to the new rhythm of her life. Gone were the mop and cleaning gloves, replaced now by a laptop, a corner desk in Peter's home office, and access to an entirely new world of operations. Peter didn't just give her a new role, he gave her dignity. At first, she hesitated to touch anything. She still greeted him with "Good morning, sir," until Peter chuckled one morning and said, "Just call me Peter, please. This is a partnership now, not servanthood." She smiled, shyly. "Okay, Peter." They fell into a rhythm, a quiet one. She took notes during his calls, organized his chaotic inbox, and reminded him to drink water between meetings. When he had tough days, she would bring a warm bowl of pepper soup and leave it beside him without saying a word. And when he had good days, he'd pause work just to ask her how her family was doing back in Suralere. Peter began opening up, slowly. He told her about his mother who passed away before she saw him make his first million, about the school in Ajagunal he once dreamed of building, about how money came fast, but trust always felt out of reach. "People treat you like a god when you're rich," he told her one night as they worked late over files. "But the moment you wobble, even just a little, they scatter like rats from a leaking boat." Stella listened, always without interruption. Her gift wasn't big words, it was presence. Her eyes never drifted to her phone. She never made him feel stupid for his fears. "You're not a god," she replied softly. "You're human, and that's enough." The words sat with him like warmth on a rainy day. Over time, Peter stopped testing people and started building things. He donated 50 million Nigerian nairas to a community school. He hired 2 interns from an orphanage. He began writing again, not business memos, but letters to himself. Gratitude letters. And everywhere he went, Stella was there. Not as his shadow, but as someone he leaned on, trusted, admired. At company dinners, people began whispering, "Is she his girlfriend?" Others muttered, "Maybe he's paying her." But Stella ignored them all. She wasn't interested in gossip. Her loyalty was quiet, rooted. One evening, a foreign investor named Marcus flew in from Dubai. During dinner at a high-end restaurant in Lekki, Peter introduced Stella as "my most trusted person." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Your PA?" Peter smiled. "More than that. She helped me see the world again." That night, as they rode home in the back seat of the black Mercedes SUV, Peter looked over at her. "You know, you've changed me." She tilted her head. "How?" "I used to think love had to look a certain way. Loud, expensive, full of drama. But you just showed up. No noise." She didn't respond immediately. Then, with a smile, she said, "Sometimes, the quietest things are the ones we need most." The words lingered between them like perfume. Weeks turned into months. Stella grew bolder, suggesting new strategies, pointing out gaps in presentations, even disagreeing with Peter when needed. "You're not here to agree with me," he reminded her once, after she apologized. "You're here because you see things I don't." One day, while sorting through old drawers, Stella found a dusty notebook filled with Peter's early business ideas, scribbles, dreams, plans he had once buried. "You should write again," she said, placing the book gently in front of him. He stared at it, his eyes soft. "Only if you'll read the first chapter." They laughed. For the first time in years, Peter felt like he was becoming someone his younger self would be proud of, not just successful, but kind. But not everyone was happy. Vanessa returned one afternoon, unannounced, in heels and full makeup. She barged into the estate like she owned the place. "You're making a fool of yourself, Peter," she snapped, standing in his living room. "You're parading your maid like she's a queen. Do you know how this looks?" Peter looked at her, expression unreadable. "No," he said calmly. "Tell me how it looks." "It looks like desperation," she spat. "Like you couldn't keep a real woman, so you hired obedience instead." Stella stood in the hallway, frozen. She'd heard every word. Peter stood slowly. "Vanessa, let me make this clear. Stella is more of a woman than you ever tried to be. And for the record, she didn't beg for anything. She earned everything." Vanessa blinked. You're in love with her, aren't you? He didn't answer. But silence, in that moment, said everything. After she left, Stella entered the room quietly. I didn't mean to cause drama, she said. If you want me to step back, I will. Peter looked at her for a long moment, then said, The only direction I want you to go is forward. With me. Stella's eyes glistened. She nodded. Just once. From that day, she stopped calling him sir. And he stopped hiding behind wealth. Together, they rebuilt everything, not on ego, but on empathy. The months that followed were nothing short of transformation. Not just for Stella, but for Peter too. He had gone from a lonely, suspicious millionaire to a man who now saw wealth as a tool, not a shield. And beside him, Stella blossomed into a woman no one could ignore. She enrolled in evening business classes, sponsored by Peter. At first, she felt out of place in lecture halls filled with polished professionals. But Peter always reassured her. You belong anywhere you choose to belong, he told her. Don't let anyone's suit fool you. Her confidence grew. Soon she wasn't just learning, she was contributing. At board meetings, she would quietly suggest improvements. Some directors rolled their eyes, but when Peter insisted, listen to her, they had no choice but to lean in. And surprisingly, Stella's observations often cut through problems seasoned executives had missed. One afternoon, she presented an idea about using tech-enabled delivery tracking in rural areas. Peter watched as even Marcus from Dubai leaned forward, nodding slowly. By the time she finished, the room broke into murmurs of approval. That day, she wasn't the maid. She was a visionary. Back at home, life took a softer rhythm. Peter and Stella developed small traditions. Sunday evening walks around Banana Island. Friday nights spent watching old Nollywood movies with bowls of suya, and long conversations about everything from childhood dreams to what kindness really meant. He learned she once wanted to be a nurse, but dropped out when her father died. She learned he once slept on a wooden bench for 6 months while starting his first company. They found pieces of themselves in each other's wounds. But not everyone cheered. Gossip spread like wildfire. A maid as the boss's right hand, staff whispered. Old friends of Peter mocked behind his back. He's lost his mind. Some even sent messages warning him she'd eventually betray him. Peter's response was simple, silence. Actions spoke louder than their whispers. Then came the night of the gala, a charity ball he hosted every year. Cameras flashed as Peter walked in, not with Vanessa or some glamorous date, but with Stella on his arm. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair braided neatly, makeup barely there. Yet she carried herself with quiet grace. When reporters asked, "Who is she?" Peter simply smiled and said, "The woman who keeps me grounded." It shook the city's gossip circles. But Peter didn't care. Later that evening, on the rooftop of the hotel, Peter turned to her. "You know, I used to think my money was my only power. But now I know, my real power is choosing who I walk with." Stella's eyes softened. "And you chose me?" He nodded. Every time. Their bond deepened. Not rushed, not loud, but steady. People mistook her humility for weakness, but Peter saw it for what it was, strength. She didn't need to prove herself with flashy words. She lived her truth daily. By the end of the year, Peter quietly rewrote his will. When his lawyer raised an eyebrow, he said simply, "I'm securing the only person who proved love without a price tag." The revelation came a month later, during a private company retreat. Peter stood before his top staff and introduced Stella, not as his maid, not even as his assistant, but as his partner, his equal. The shock was palpable. Some clapped, some stared, but none could deny the respect she had earned. Afterwards, when they returned home, Stella sat quietly, still overwhelmed. "Why me?" she whispered. "I was just cleaning floors." Peter placed his hand over hers. "Because queens are not born from titles, Stella. They're revealed when life tests them. You passed when everyone else failed." Tears filled her eyes, but they were the kind of tears that cleanse, not of pain, but of gratitude. And so, the maid who once tiptoed through marble halls now walked boldly beside the man who once doubted love. Together, they built not just businesses, but a life grounded in trust, empathy, and second chances.